Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, folks. Welcome to Gibson's Bookstore Remote. I am Elizabeth, the Bookstore Events Coordinator, and I am joined tonight by Juliet Grames, who has joining us for the paperback tour of her bestseller, The 7 or 8 Deaths of Stella Fortuna. And she is joined in conversation by her friend and fellow author, Erika Swyler, who you may know from the Department of Speculation, or her new paperback of The Light from Other Stars. I will start this event by saying that the Gibson's Bookstore Events program is sustained by book sales. So if you would like a copy of these authors' books, we do have them available in the store. We do also have signed book plates to include with any of these purchases that you might purchase from our store. So I'm going to toss a link into the chat bar here. And if anytime during this conversation you do have questions that you would like to ask the author, I will be keeping an eye on that. Go ahead and click around. There's a Q&A function and there is a chat function as well. Leah says, nice to see your beautiful faces, Erika and Juliet. So glad to have the two of you here this evening. Can you guys start? Tell me a little bit about your books, how you know each other.
Yeah, I'm jumping in. I'm going first. I'm going to tell you about Erika. Okay, Erika here. On my screen, she's below me, so that's why I'm pointing down. But is a very dear friend of mine. I went back and I checked my email to see exactly how long we've been friends, and the answer is since 2010. Erika, did you know that?
I did not know that, but go us. I knew it was a while, but yeah, wow, okay.
We've actually been, we were brought together by a mutual friend who introduced us because we were trying to form a writing group. And the thing about writing groups is that you go from talking to strangers who you know nothing about to telling them really your deepest, most innermost secrets, because they're cutting right into the raw product of your brain before you've had a chance to edit it or make it palatable for the world. So Erika knows things about me that she shouldn't.
Yeah, I would say Juliet has been privy to a lot of, I seem very nice. I'm also quite catty. I think Juliet has seen some very bad parts of my personality.
We have really strong, powerful things to say, and sometimes that comes out in mean forms, but sometimes it comes out in beautiful forms like Light from Other Stars, which is Erika's second book here. Okay, and that's my first book. So here's what happened to us. As long as we've been friends, our books came out, they both came out on the same day last May in hardcover. And our respective publishers were so generously sending us on these big tours, and we never overlapped. In fact, Erika came to my hometown in Rhode Island on a day that I was somewhere else. So we never even saw each other during this time. And we've been waiting for more than a year to be able to talk to each other about our books. So I'm going to talk to you about Light from Other Stars, which everyone here who has not read yet needs to read. It is one of a kind. It's a beautiful literary novel with a powerful speculative element to it. So, for me, where I'm a closet sci-fi fantasy reader as well as literary fiction reader, it's exactly satisfies me on both of those planes. But it starts with an episode that a lot of people of our certain generation, it was really formative, which was the Challenger. And it starts with a little girl who's watching the Challenger disaster in real time in Florida, where she lives. And she's on the cusp of deciding that she wants to be an astronaut herself. And you get to see her both from that moment when the shuttle takes off to her present day when she is an astronaut, and you get to see everything that happens in between, including a very strange scenario. I'm avoiding all spoilers, Erika. So that something happens in her town because her father makes a mistake, and as a result, her life goes on a wildly different path than she thinks it was going to. It's a story that says much about the value of science and the necessary commitments that we have to make in order for progress to happen, to also, I think, the cost of, I guess, ambition, or of prioritizing things over our families and our loved ones. And it's a beautiful story about friendship and about a mother and daughter. And I think just everyone should read it. That's my pitch. Everyone should read this. Oh, wait, and I'm going to read only one thing to you. It's her dedication.
Oh, no.
This book is dedicated to the Hubble Space Telescope, which opened the universe to me. It is also dedicated to the teachers who did not believe a 5th grade girl could speak knowledgeably about the Hubble Space Telescope. You remain embarrassingly wrong. So I think, you know, everything that Erika writes about in here, they're all themes that I hold dear that I think everyone will be entertained by. So that's my pitch. Read it.
Oh my gosh. So you should all have Juliet talk about how great your work is to your face. It is terribly embarrassing and also really, really wonderful and kind. So now I get my revenge. So I have seen this beautiful book since its infant pages. The 7 or 8 Deaths of Stella Fortuna is what I want to call an absolutely epic family saga that is also part ghost story that starts with Assunta, who is Stella Fortuna's mother. Oh my gosh, hold on. I must pause for a minute to show you one of my favorite things. This book contains a family tree.
Oh, yeah.
And it's totally necessary for navigating it and also adds such an incredible, incredible charm to it. And I'm going to touch back on that later.
It's actually really
so
hard.
It follows the life. Yeah, they're so hard to make and they're so important. But
spoilers. It was hard without spoilers. So, but there are none.
Oh, you did it.
Yeah.
You did it. You totally did it. And it has the family tree has a real flavor to it. So you get the sense of not just the narrator, but the family itself and Stella Fortuna herself. So it begins in the small town of, I asked Juliet how to pronounce this, Yavoli. Did I do it right?
You did. I liked your alternate pronunciation though.
I said Iavoli. I'm very waspy, can you tell? But yes, Yavoli, Italy. And it follows this very poor Italian family in this small town through many generations after war, through immigration to Hartford. And it follows this particular woman and how she has nearly died 7, possibly 8 times. I'm going to spoil and say there is a drowning because that's really close to my heart. But what it does is it tells a really complicated story, not just of immigration, which is incredibly important to focus on right now, but of what it has meant to be a woman throughout time in a man's world, what it is to be a woman who has a very strong sense of self and ambition, and still be confined to this culture that it's built your family, it's made everyone that you love, but it's also slowly pushing you down. So I look at this book and I think this is a story of how you look at your family and you wonder how they got this particular way. Who are these people? And how you view your life through your elders. And it is this incredibly powerful story that is it's at times heartbreaking, but it's also hilarious, and it's complex. And yeah, I have an absolute ton of things to comment on here from Juliet, but you should know that every time I said, wow, that is unbelievable, I can't even understand, she said, oh yes, no, that really happens. This happens a lot. This is all the time. So the research that went into this is enormous. It is an incredible feat. And you wind up learning so much about specific cultures, about Yavoli in itself, the different types of Italian people who came to the US, and what it means to come from a very specific culture that you're then asked to assimilate and not just be from where you are, but now you're not from Yavoli anymore. You're just Italian, and now you're an Italian in America. And what does that mean? And what does that mean in this particular town? And it's navigating a particular type of identity that's really, it's unique. And at the same time, I think we can all sort of take something from it that really speaks to who we are in our particular journey. So I found myself looking at my own family history going, I wish I had asked more questions. So I think when you read this book, you will start to really take apart your own family's journey. And I think it brings you a lot closer to understanding what an American identity is, which is a lot of different identities rolled into one. So I saw this book in so many baby forums, and I remember asking Juliet, like, who is this narrator? What is this narrator about? Because it's framed in this beautiful way that's it has this feel of oral history. You're very much being told a story. And since the first way we tend to encounter stories is parents reading to us or fairy tales being told to us. There's this real familiar feel to it. And there is a very specific narrator, and I don't particularly want to spoil it too much because it's sort of, it's woven throughout. But the real magic of the book is that that narrator becomes you in a lot of ways. So I think that's a real gift and something that, for a debut novelist, I'm incredibly jealous of you, Juliet. That's quite the feat. So this is...
You could have said that the narrator becomes you. That is a powerful compliment. Okay, everything that you just said that sounded so nice to me, I realized are things that I feel about your book. So I have two theories. One is that you and I just really like the same things, or the other is that we've both found in the other's work what we most admire or aspire to. Is that, for example, you're complimenting my research. Erika here is an inspiration. She's a researching inspiration. Erika gets the tiniest nitty-gritty details. She's such a scientist about how she researches things, but then she's completely bloodless about not even using the information. She's just like, well, that was important to my storytelling, so I just didn't include it. I don't want to bore my reader with it. I'm like, the hell with that. I'm going to bore my reader with this fact because it is too cool. I'm not leaving it out. So she's a lot more disciplined than I am with research. I love that she's here complimenting me on my research.
But I think that has a lot to do with writing in different genres. Like I would call yours, it's historical fiction and family saga. And when you're reading historical fiction, you're going for this, you're going for that. People are reading that going, I want to know what that shoe buckle is called. I want to know that specific type of pasta. That reader really wants that information. Whereas, my reader isn't necessarily going to know exactly, going to want to know what the insulation on the space shuttles was made out of. I could tell you all about it, and it was so cool. But that's the sort of thing, like, I use research to try and fuel my energy from it, because, like, yeah, I could absolutely bore you to death about, like, the chemical makeup of something, because that's what I needed to do to learn for a scene. But, like, that's also going to detract you from, for me, in the way I write dialogue, it's going to wind up detracting from the undercurrent and attention these two people have right now. So it's just different. It's different styles for different stories, I think. But yeah, like, I definitely feel like I've been to Yavoli now, and that's due to research, and it's due to just, I don't think I had witnessed someone I'd known really take a physical journey to learn a book. And that's what you did. Do you want to, like, tell us about going to Italy and doing the research for this?
Wait. You know someone who would write a book and not use it as a tax write-off to take a trip to the place of setting the book? Who are your friends?
Okay. True. Good point.
No, but Yavoli's really cool. And this is the thing, since I am Italian, my mom is on right now. Thank you, Mom. Hi, I see you. My mom was talking to me about this earlier. She's like, do you think now that this book is out and so many people have read it, more people will go to Yavoli? I don't know. It would be so, there's nothing there. There's 200 people there. There's like a coffee shop, what they call a bar, where you can get espresso and cognac. And there's really nothing else that you can do. So I went there for a month and there was nothing to do. So I wrote 40,000 words in a month. It was amazing. And I met a lot.
Oh my God.
I met a lot of really old people, because this is the problem with emigration. I mean, in Italy, so many people felt like they were forced to leave their villages in order to find a better life. And this is pretty recent memory. This mass Italian migration happened in the 20th century up until the 60s. So people there still feel this absence of lost family, and a lot of them did end up in the States or elsewhere, but there's not a lot of vitality and youth. Young people feel like they need to go elsewhere for opportunity, and that's sad. But the lucky part is that there's lots of very, very old people who remember the 20s and 30s who were there for me to talk to and interview, and they were really happy to talk to me. So it was cool. It was, if you do want to go to Yavoli, for tourist purposes, you should definitely write to me because I will tell you what to see.
I will bring you along with me is what I will do. That's how I will.
Awesome.
That's how I will approach it.
Okay, well, in that case, let's turn the setting question on you here, because the book Light from Other Stars is set in Florida. And I remember in early days of this, so Erika's first book, The Book of Speculation, was a huge hit, and everyone was reading it, and everyone was expecting her to have to make this decision about, is she writing literary fiction or is she writing speculative fiction, because it's literary fiction with a kind of speculative element. And at that time she was having a conversation with, I can't remember who it was, but someone important to you, who was like, you should go for Florida weird, because you have this streak that you write about Florida weird. I mean, Erika has lived in Florida and she knows some really weird Florida stories. I'm allowed to talk about Florida weird because my husband is a Floridian, so some of it lives in my house. But I think that you capture in this book, there is a really important role played by a green monkey, and
yes.
And this is a secret no one outside of this event will know. But in the earliest draft that I read of this book, it wasn't a green monkey; it was a mouse, I think. So, and there was a point that you were editing it, and you were like, a mouse just isn't weird enough for this story. I need a green monkey. Because you know what? In Florida, green monkeys are real and they're around. They may be found on your truck. Like, you may find a green monkey. So can you talk to us a little bit about your relationship with Florida and maybe some of the inspirations that helped you bring it alive here?
Oh, sure. So I think when people write about Florida, they think, oh God, Florida is so terrible. It's just a laughingstock. But Florida weird is like the best joy that the US has to offer, especially for writers, because anything that you can dream up, it's actually happened there in some way or another. I don't know if people have read Swamplandia or not, but it's very close to some things that actually exist. When I lived in Florida, for a while, we lived near the Holy Land Experience, which was a religious theme park where Jesus was crucified daily and people would come and travel there for pilgrimages. Like it's a really, and this was right next to Universal Studios. I'm not sure if it's still there, but it's this weird mishmash of all different types of cultures. And so that was, you think like, gosh, this is bonkers, but no, it really does exist. And as I was trying to put in, the weirdness of Florida, I was thinking, well, there's gotta be an abandoned zoo or amusement park or something, because that's so deeply Florida, and animals escaping is also deeply Florida. So I was making this thing up in this area that I was writing about. And then as I was going back to do research, I came across that this was an actual thing in the area that I was writing about. There was an abandoned theme park. It was initially owned, I want to say, by Johnny Weissmuller, the former Tarzan, and animals had escaped from it and the monkeys had escaped. And so this thing that I was writing just to up the weird was actually there. And as for the green monkeys, we had a wonderful roommate who we used to live with. He said, there are green monkeys all over the place. I said, what are you talking about? And yeah, there's a certain wild monkey population in Florida now, and they turn sort of green because algae grows on their fur. So when you want to up the weird in Florida, you never have to look too far. And it really delights Floridians to read it, I have to say. I have had zero complaints from people who live in Florida. They just go, yep, nope, that's Florida. And the neatest thing about the Space Coast, the area that I was writing about, is that it's this real intersection of old world Florida culture, that's where citrus culture was really at its deepest, that then butted up against military culture and then space culture. So you have like the smartest people in the world living and working in this area, butting up against this really ingrained small town culture. And there's this clash that's really, it's interesting. And it's also sociologically an interesting place to explore, because basically it was an enormous land grab by the military. They said, okay, we're going to take all these citrus growers and we're just going to buy them out, and we have a base here now. And they brought in all sorts of things like a hospital, but at the same time, it's also changing a culture dramatically in like 5 to 10 years. So it's a culturally ripe place to write, to explore, and it's also really, really beautiful. So it's fun to write about. And as far as, you know, writing about the Space Coast in the 80s, it's just super cool and kind of what I dug as a kid. So it was fun to live in that way. So yeah, my Florida experiences have been fun and strange. I have an essay about one somewhere, but yeah, it's, many books are written about Florida because many should be written about Florida. Yeah. It's just how we all join together. Very fertile ground. So I'm going to ask you a question that, well, no, I'm going to ask you a question based on what you probably get asked a lot. How often do you get asked if this book is about your family, Juliet Grames? And how do you respond to that?
100% of the time. It is actually the first question I'm asked by every group, large or small, is always how much of this book is true and how much of the book is fiction. And I have a pat answer, which is the answer is revealed in the last paragraph of text. It will answer all of your questions.
That is true. Yes. That is absolutely true, and that is exactly how you should read it. And in no way should we think about it in any other way. How has it been for your family to have this out and knowing that you're getting asked a million times, is this your family? Have they come up to you and been like, am I in this book? Because families have a tendency to do that.
Are you asking me this question, or are you asking me if I'm often asked this question? Because the answer to the second one is yes.
Both.
Yeah.
Because I'm asking you this with your mother in the chat here, so.
My mother is a good Italian mother, and she comes to every single one of my events. I have good Italian cousins and uncles. Some of them may well be, and I can't scroll through the attendee list right now, but they may well be here and have come to many events. They are so supportive because, you know, we stick together. And
oh yeah.
And that's something that's universally true of Italians. Omertà is only true of some of us, and in my case, it didn't apply. I never learned that. So
it's funny because you get that sense of togetherness so much through your book. And as I'm a German American, as you can probably tell from the last name, and if you're reading this as a German American, you're just like, no, you just wouldn't talk to that family again. Why would you ever do that? Why would you associate with them? No, we'd be out. So it was such an interesting insight into just these different cultural, you know, values within our country, within this particular area even. So I envy you, your very large, tight-knit family now. It's
in an Italian
awesome.
Family, as you see in the book, when you have a blood feud that's lasted 30 years, you still share one backyard. So
yes,
a different flavor of blood feud than the German blood feud.
Yeah, no, the German blood feud is we just don't talk to you ever again. It seemed like the Italian blood feud was just, we will cut down all the trees and bushes and stare at you, which I respect.
You understand my people, Erika. You've got it. You got it.
But it's interesting because I feel like, I mean, I tend to work with such small families. I was, you know, and I still find that there are too many characters to manage on the page at sometimes I'm thinking, I've got a family of 3 here and there are still too many of them. How is managing someone, you know, a family that large on the page?
It's really interesting. It's so interesting you just said that. No one has ever asked me this question, by the way. I couldn't have fewer characters. I thought I wouldn't get it down to this few number of characters. I think the original draft had many more. And there's something about, for me, character development happens in the space between all of these tiny interactions that you have with people that affect you deeply. Like a thing that one person says once that you never forget, and it changes your behavior forever. I'll give you an example. This is my personal life example. I was at a book event for the publishing industry with a bookseller who I've never seen since. She's from somewhere out west, and we were at a cocktail party together. It just totally random, and we're sitting there, and I just sold my book, and I was so excited for it to be coming out. And I said, "Oh, I hope I deserve this." And she said to me, "I don't believe in the word deserve. because the thing is that no one ever deserves anything they get. There are people who never have access to opportunity, and there are people who have all kinds of access to opportunity. And your question is just whether you're going to live well and do your best. And I was like, and this, I can't even remember this woman's name, but I've thought of that every day since. And I don't use the word deserve anymore. And I think that that's like, so for me, if I were writing the book of my life, it would be hard to leave that woman out of this story, even though she's part of it for 30 seconds. Now, so for me, that's what happened. To create Stella's character, I needed 8 million other characters around her, and the family just took over and kept, eating into the page count. But your story, on the other hand, is so intensely focused on these two parental relationships, this was actually one of my favorite points of this book that I wanted to talk about today. The trauma of this book happens to do with Netta's father, and she loves him dearly. He is a really intense scientist. He's very well respected, and he's a genius. And there's a lot between them that she admires, and that she, inspires who she wants to be. And he makes a terrible mistake, not entirely his fault, I will say, but that ends up changing the course of all these lives. Okay, so the core plot question is one between Netta and her father, but for me, the relationship that binds the book is Netta and her mom. And you don't know that going in. The mom, Bethine, is a really modest character, actually. She doesn't like force herself on you at all, and then she just becomes I think the glue that holds everything together. And I think that this is really a touching mother-daughter story. And you talk about science and ambition, and we know that Bethine is a scientist at heart, a really good scientist, but whose ambition was interrupted by, now she's a mom, and she channels her technical capacity, which is incredible, into baking. And I love how you've taken this gender narrative that baking is a thing that girly women do, and you've made it into something that you've proven in the text that it's a science, and that it's something we should be proud of, and also that it requires the discipline and intelligence of a scientist to pull up. And I just, that's just one example about Bethine and about how she channels the warmth in this story. But I was wondering, Erika, question 1 and 2, how much of this book was inspired by your own relationships with your parents? Because I have known you for 10 years, and I've known during that time, I know how close you were with your mom. So tell us the truth.
Sure. Oh, here's the naked truth. So my dad was a scientist, and my mom was an artist. And that's where it starts and stops, really. My dad helped spur my interest in science, and the science projects that Netta and her dad do in the book are science projects either I did with my father or my sister did with my father. There's a scene in the book where they're trying to figure out how you would calculate how much salt is in the ocean. And I think that might have been my 6th grade science project. I'm not really sure, but so that's my love of science and my belief that anyone can learn it if you have the right teacher. That really came from him. Bethine is not at all my mother, with the exception of one very specific conversation about having children, because I do not. And she's saying, well, it's different because everyone tells you that you immediately fall in love with your baby and you are just overwhelmed with joy. But for her, she said the second we were put on her chest, she didn't feel that because she didn't know who we were yet, and it's very hard to fall in love with someone you don't yet know. And so that was the most, to me, honest sounding conversation, the honest statement about motherhood I'd ever heard. And I'd never heard it from anybody else. So I thought, well, no one is so terribly unique that they have an original thought. So this must be a common thing for other women, and let me dig into that. And so that kind of thought was what really stuck with Bethine for me. I think Bethine's character came out of, I've seen a lot of women blossom after divorce, after a husband's death, and not necessarily because they were living in bad circumstances or didn't love their partner or anything like that, but simply because society asks us to behave a certain way when we are in heterosexual relationships. And even when we try and push against that, it's still this ingrained thing that we don't necessarily know that we're sort of bowing to. And in the time when Bethine was choosing whether to become a mother or whether to pursue science, these things you would or risk being told you were a failure at both. So that's kind of where her choice came from. And I think the way I wanted to approach her was with the way we look at our moms now as adults, when you can realize that they are people and they have been through struggles that we could not possibly understand. And I think what I really wanted to get at with Netta and Bethine is the journey to understanding that your parents are people, they're flawed, and that's what makes them wonderful. So, that's where Bethine came out of. And Theo is, like, I think that's Netta's father. Theo wears my dad's shirts. That's about it. Nothing else about him is really taken from my dad much at all. His explanation of entropy is taken from my friend Lydia. I said, Lydia, who is she's a lovely woman who works in STEM. She codes and builds and runs websites. So how would you explain entropy to your daughter, who happens to be, if she was 11 at the time? And she said, oh, well, here you have marbles. And I was like, perfect. Yes, that's how you would do it clearly. But also that could be confusing if you're just not ready to get something. So yeah, Theo is a combination of all sorts of people that I know, women in STEM, oddly enough, and just sort of that idealized closeness that you would want to have with a parental figure. So yeah, my inspiration, possibly my parents, but not really on the page.
Someday you'll write.
Yeah, someday.
Yeah,
someday.
I'm there for it.
But so we were talking about voices that don't necessarily get to be heard.
Yeah.
So I was thinking this is we have some stuff.
We do. We should tell the people what we're doing. We, to be perfectly frank, Erika and I were both a little bit, we didn't want to take up bandwidth this week when the nation has so much on its mind already with so many other things. And we are grateful that you're here with us tonight, but we're also really both passionately committed to having justice finally be a thing in our nation. And so we are both making a donation based on your attendance tonight, as you may have heard, to charities that we've picked. Erika, you want to talk about yours?
Yes. So I'm making a donation to National Bailout, which is, as they say, hashtag get Black mamas out of jail. People should not, especially now during COVID, people should not be sitting in jail for any longer than humanly possible just because they can't make an arbitrary fee. It keeps families apart. I think we all know that the justice system at this point in time has a lot of problems and that a lot of change is needed. So any way to get people out of a dangerous situation and on the road to fixing what's going on, that is what I'm backing. So it is a Black Lives Matter supported charity, and I think it is directly fixing a problem that's happening right now.
Fantastic. And I chose, on the recommendation of a friend I dearly respect, a Brooklyn charity called Girls for Gender Equity, which is involved in social and psychological programming that helps support young women of color in New York City. And it has all kinds of fantastic community outreach. And I'm really excited to learn about them and to contribute to them too, because, Stella is a story of it. And I think that feminism is one of my major themes that is so important to me. And so any kind of feminist cause is very near and dear to my heart. I like the crossover here. But we were both prepared to contribute up to $500 each to these charities. And we didn't hit that cap. So we're offering you a chance to make us pay out even more right now. We put together a list of some of our favorite delightful books by living Black writers. So it's actually, we couldn't We couldn't put them all in, obviously. We went for living writers so that these are content creators who can still earn royalties and who can, be part of, you can experience their daily dialogue, and they're so fantastic. And we're going to share them with you. And Elizabeth and Gibson's have been generous enough to put up an entire landing page on their website where you can see this whole group together, all of our recommendations. For every copy of any of these books that you purchase, from whatever venue, although I highly encourage you to purchase them from Gibson's or another independent bookstore, but definitely please support, support local stores, and send a proof of purchase to me. And Elizabeth will tell you how. We will donate an additional $5. So in other words, you can make us really shell out for these books, but we're also just really excited because we realize how many books we love that we want to talk about, and we're going to skip some of the ones that other people are talking about right now and go for our favorites.
Yeah, I feel like you all know the lists that are being circulated around on how to educate yourself. I think it's really important that we talk about art, because reading this art is a way of educating yourself and also getting joy from it. And Black voices produce arguably the best literature in the US right now. And one of the authors on this list, I'm thoroughly convinced is going to win the Nobel Prize one day. Oh, Jesmyn Ward. Oh my gosh. If you've won the National Book Award twice, your writing is like that. And you are, yes, she's writing like nobody else in the moment right now.
So if you're picking one Jesmyn Ward title that everyone should start with, what's your go-to?
So I'm going to make you start with Salvage the Bones, which is on the list here. And I'm going to make you start with that because I think it's less approachable than Sing Unburied Sing, because it is, it's about working class and impoverished families on the Gulf Coast in the days leading up to Katrina, but it's also intensely involved in the world of dogfighting. It is gory, it is brutal, it is deeply beautiful. And as white people, we approach dogfighting like the horror, this is terrible. And we don't necessarily understand the cultural context of it and what it means to people, and the tie to the land and the people who do it. And it's just an achingly beautiful book about sibling love, family, and just this encroaching with Katrina looming overhead. So I think it's just a remarkable book. It was her first National Book Award, and it is, I cannot possibly say enough good things about it. And you'll be seeing Sing Unburied Sing all over the place again right now for a lot of reasons. But I would encourage you to, again, read a little more broadly and go back to Salvage the Bones.
Well, I want to start off with, you may or may not know that my secret life, aka my day job, is I'm a crime fiction editor. So this is a whole shelf of crime fiction novels behind me. But I want to recommend Attica Locke, who is so awesome. She won the Edgar recently for a book called Bluebird, which is great. But I want you to go back to her debut, which is a book called Blackwater Rising. The title is an allusion to oil. It's set in Houston during the oil crisis. And it is, I hands down, one of the best 5 crime novels that have been published this century. I read a lot. It's so perfect. And Attica Locke herself is so cool. After she wrote a couple novels and published them and they got some awards, she went on to go write and produce Empire, which is what she's also doing while writing other novels. This woman is so multifacetedly talented and intelligent, and it's just a joy to be in her hands and reading her stuff. And there's a really cool thread in Blackwater Rising about the Black Power movement and about how the FBI suppressed it, CIA, which I didn't know. Was it FBI or CIA? I forgot. But I learned so much from it, and it's just a delight. It's a total delight. So that's my first rec. What's your genre go-to, Erika?
Oh, so I kind of read all over the map, and that's why my books are sort of all over the map. My next, I have been pushing this book on people since I discovered it. Haha, I'm claiming it. No, it is Mem by Bethany Morrow. She has a new YA book out right now, but I have not got my hands on it yet. It's on order. But Mem is, so it's science fiction fantasy. It is an alternate history. And the hook of the book is that memories, painful memories can be extracted and put into physical form. So you don't have to feel the pain anymore. And this memory just lives on doing its own thing. And one of these memories has become sentient, and it has become autonomous. And it happens to be the first memory that was ever extracted. And so it's this book that tries to figure out why this memory is different. Is this memory a person? And it is one of the most creative, interesting, beautiful science fiction fantasy books I have ever read. It's a tight little book. There is not an extra word to spare. It's fabulous in that way. And if you want to read something where you feel better at the ending, this is that book. I have never had anyone that I've put it in their hands come back and say, why did you give that to me? They always come back and say, thank you. So this is the height.
I read this book on your recommendation, and this is a little bit embarrassing to admit, but when I bought it and it was so short, I was like, yes, a book I can read.
Yes.
I got so excited to have a short book, and then it was so beautiful.
It's so beautiful. It is a delicious snack. It's so good. And it does what the best science fiction and fantasy does. It really asks you what it is to be human, how we define human, and how we make that better. So, to do that with such economy is just, it's art, the highest art. So yes, Men was my second pick.
Okay, I'm going to go next because I'm a mom of a 19-year-old baby. And right before we all got on the screen together here, we were chatting with our host, Elizabeth, about the difficulty of finding picture books by Black authors, which is sort of ridiculous. But my baby has been obsessed with a book called Each Kindness by Jacqueline Woodson. And you probably know Jacqueline Woodson already because she's multiple National Book Award winning author of YA and poetry and other genres, but she also writes picture books. And Each Kindness is, I'm not gonna lie to you, I cry every time I read it because it is about, it's about a girl who at school is unkind to a new girl, and then the new girl moves away and she can never fix the relationship. But it's such an ordinary story, and I don't know why my 19-month-old, he became obsessed with the metaphor in the story, which is that when you drop a stone into water, the ripples move out into the world. And so if you are the kindness, you can be a stone of kindness and send ripples of kindness out into the world. And we have read it so many times. I cry every time. He wants to go drop stones into a bowl of water. So if you are also a parent and you're looking for a picture book, this is an older one. I bet you haven't seen it. You should go for it. Each Kindness, Jacqueline Woodson.
I'm going to interrupt here and mention that Gibson's Bookstore, our events program, is sustained by book sales like these. So I have dropped a link to the book list that they are reading off of. I've put it in the chat, and we will be emailing it out after we send an email with the recorded video link. So it is easy for you to click through that list and take a peek at these. And also that, again, that Juliet and Erika's books are available. So that is it's really nice to see, as we had been discussing earlier, just books about things that are not just about trauma. Because I want to share these books with my own children. Yeah. And I try and find books, and if they're on a list, usually it's because it's speaking about an issue, but I also want to share picture books with my children that is about a child who is not just going through something terrible, but also maybe they want a stuffed unicorn, you know, or just something. So having nice picture books for children is also really nice.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to jump in there and say, as far as books that are not about trauma or, you know, the particular trauma of in American history, I'm going to recommend a novella called The Black God's Drums. It's by P. Djeli Clark, and it is set in this alternate history New Orleans, and it's steampunk. And when we think steampunk, we usually think, oh, people in Victorian England garb and aether and all sorts of things. But this is like steampunk New Orleans with Haitian gods and influences, a really interesting, plucky, I hate the word plucky, but she's just a really tough young girl character. and pirates, oh my gosh, sky pirates, lady sky pirates, and a weather making machine. So it's just all out there wild fantasy that is such a unique voice that's unlike what you're used to reading in genre. And I think it's just it's an incredible little book. Again, this is like something you would spend an afternoon with and then go back and read it again and go, what was that? I want more. So I encourage people to dig into stuff that's not necessarily always historical, but a little bit out there. There are lots of wonderful Black voices in every genre. So dig deep and broaden your reading.
Can I say, Erika, I've been trying to read we're getting these amazing comments in the chat section. Thank you all for those. And if anyone else has suggestions for us, please put them in there because we want to see them too. And we didn't get to buy any books from Gibson's today, so you can help us decide what we're going to be buying from Gibson's later with some do we have time for one more rec each before we do audience questions, you think?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to do a twofer. I'm going to squash them in. If you're a nonfiction reader, I have 2 suggestions. And I love nonfiction personally for audiobooks because I like to listen to informational stuff while I'm doing chores. I don't know if anyone else is like that, but another plug for independent bookstores. If you like audiobooks, there's a great service called Libro FM. So you can quit your Audible account and you can instead support indie bookstores, which is what I do. If you have a favorite indie, you can peg your account to that indie, or you can have it go into a general pool that supports all indies. But Libro.fm, they're great. Anyway, my 2 nonfictions for you. One is Isabel Wilkerson's The Warmth of Other Suns, which is she's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and this is a history of the Great Migration. And it goes from, which is when Black Southerners started moving north in Jim Crow era. So it goes from 1915 to 1970-ish, and it follows specifically three people who migrate. One goes to California, one goes to Detroit, and one goes to New York. So they're kind of the 3 big legs of the Great Migration. I read this book because I was interested in the topic. And it's beautifully written and it's a very entertaining read. But I also read it when I was in the fundamental drafting stages of Stella. I'm writing a book about emigration. And I think that if you really want to understand American emigration, you need to understand the Great Migration. It's a huge piece of why any of us are where we are has to do with how labor moved during the Jim Crow era, and how if those of us who are of white ethnicity, how our white ancestors ended up filling jobs that were either vacated or moved around because of what happened during the Great Migration. So it's really informative and wonderful. And the other nonfiction I wanted to recommend is a culinary history called The Cooking Gene by Michael Twitty, and where he goes and he unpacks the history of quote unquote American cuisine, and he chases it down to where it came from. And its origins are always fascinating, and he's a great writer. He pins a lot of really beloved important American dishes to the slave chefs at plantation kitchens who were innovative and had to work with certain parameters that forced them to be creative, and also to include African culinary elements in what would then now become really celebrated American cuisine. And he also dispels some myths about foods that we think are traditionally Southern that are in fact not and have completely different origins. So I highly recommend him.
And I'm going to squeeze in 2 really quick. First of all, if you love 7 or 8 Deaths of Stella Fortuna, I'm going to ask you to pair it with Breath, Eyes, Memory by Edwidge Danticat, which is the story of a woman's life that's divided between Haiti and New York, and how this leads to, what it does to your personality, what it does to your being. And it is an immigration story that is just, Edwidge Danticat's writing is, you could call it poetry. It's beautiful. I can't even explain how good it is. And another that is out last year, he is my publisher mate, I would say. Deshaun Charles Winslow has In West Mills, and I think it is about to come out in paperback, and you should definitely pre-order it. It is this beautiful, beautiful book that centers around Not Center, who is a difficult woman. She is complicated, she loves to drink, and she is not apologizing for herself. And it's sort of about how this town of West Mills and the people within it both judge her and take care of her. And it's this really beautiful exploration of what family looks like and how that travels throughout history. And Deshawn's words are just, he writes, there is such a softness and wit to them that's really hard to find anywhere else. And the love and joy he has for his characters spills out all over the page, and you just, it's a breath. So I highly, highly, highly recommend it. And those are my last 2 recs. Obviously, we could go on forever. We had a real problem paring things down.
Really long, and we had already editorialized a lot before then. So, thank you all for letting us do this.
Well, we do have one suggestion. Diane suggests "Red at the Bone" by Woodson as her recommendation, and Ryan, who's actually one of our coworkers who loved Stella, by the way. She reminds me that you can use the code LAYDOWN if you and on Libro FM, if you sign up for Libro FM and use Gibson's Bookstore as your home store, you can use the code LAYDOWN, one word, LAYDAWN, for 3 audiobooks for the price of 1 when you sign up, because they sponsor our podcast. So if you do make the switch and you drop Audible, you can get multiple books and perhaps some of the ones from this list. Let us in our last segment here, let us jump into some audience questions. So if you do have a question for Juliet or Erika, please click around, find the chat or the Q&A. We had Nancy ask, what inspired Juliet to write 7 or 8? She says she sees much of her Italian family.
Nancy, it was your Italian family who inspired me to write it. Okay, no, I'm kind of joking, but I did interview a lot of ladies. I interviewed Italian Americans and also Italians back in Italy to try to put this together. And I coupled together a lot of people's family stories. And I had really 3 inspirations. I wanted to write about my grandmother's generation, which I felt has been critically forgotten or neglected, because there are a lot of things that happened to people in that generation that were, unattractive, and they're not things that their children wanted to remember about them. A lot of family secrets and protecting legacies. And I just thought usually the victims in situations like that are the women whose true stories never get told. I wanted to write about women like my grandmother and her generation. I really wanted to write about Calabria specifically, or Southern Italy more generally, because when I was trying to research it, I found so little had been written about it, and what had been written was so unflattering. And I had been there, and I knew how amazing, wonderful, beautiful, fascinating, intellectual, culturally rich this place was. And so I wanted to vindicate it. It's an apology for Calabria. And third, I really wanted to write about the immigrant experience, which was something that it was, huge in I grew up, I'm a 2nd generation American, but I got to have my grandparents for a very long time. And I saw their pride in where they had come from, and the idea that they had been forced to leave a place that they loved so much really was a founding principle in my life. And I was obsessed with it, and it's helped me throughout my life really feel like I connect with everyone else who wants to talk about their immigrant story, regardless of where they're from. So those were my inspirations. Thank you for asking.
We have a comment here for Erika. Life on Chala was fascinating. The fluid relationships, the personal sacrifices, and the acceptance of losses. Is there anything that informed that when you were?
Yeah. So a lot of this book was very much written in the wake of the 2016 election, when I was not feeling so great about how people treated each other and what we were all about to be allowed. I felt like we'd taken a great step backwards as far as viewing each other as people. And when I think of the future, and when I think of what the best of people are, it happens in small groups. And I think you've probably noticed this a lot in quarantine, people leaning together and really trying to take care of each other. The best of people are in small groups, and we lean towards love. And I also think how we are and how we view gender and sexuality and race right now is quite antiquated, and has absolutely nothing to do with what occurs in nature, and certainly nothing to do with what occurs in space. Space is non-binary. space. Gender doesn't exist in space. The gender, the way we perceive it on Earth, doesn't apply on any other planet. So the second you leave planet, you leave that behind. And that's kind of, that's what I wanted to explore, this different kind of leaning into each other, of what family looks like. And I think I accidentally, or not, I unintentionally built a little utopia. And I think that that's what I find hopeful about space, the opportunity to leave those constrictions that we have from governments, from stigma, from how we've traditionally perceived society. Leaving that behind is incredibly hopeful to me. So that's why it's, parts of the story are a certain degree in the future, and that's why they have a softness to them as far as relationships and fluidity.
So do either of you guys want to talk about any upcoming projects that you have?
Ooh.
Anything exciting around the corner? Let's
see. So I have a couple things I'm working on, but nothing I could possibly show anybody yet without dying of embarrassment. My drafts tend to be many and quite awful before they're ready to show people. I was working on something with AI for a while, and now I'm also working on a project that heavily involves folklore, but futuristic folklore, because why do anything simple when you can make it complicated?
Motto to live by, right there. Yes. I just finished a draft of my second novel last week. Thanks to my parents and my in-laws, who merged their quarantine bubbles with ours and provided childcare. Otherwise, none of that would ever come about. So thank you, generous ladies who took care of my baby. I feel very privileged.
Yeah, you did an entire book tour with a baby. You're a hero.
The baby and my mom. So there was that. She would be like playing with him in the hotel pool while I was doing the book event, or bringing him to the book event. So really, this is the Italian moms. They're they bring
family.
Can I answer a question that I see in the chat panel here? Janine Woodsworth asked, Janine, I love you for bringing this up. Her question was, how many instruments do you play, Juliet, or is it your voice? I can only guess that this is a reference to the fact that if you Google me, it says that I'm a musical artist. And this is a very, very funny story, because I am not a musical artist. I believe what happened is that the Google search algorithm, they seem to have found the audiobook recording that my German publisher put out, and they didn't recognize, because it was in German, that it was an audiobook and not an album. So I'm now listed as a musical artist. However, I like to joke about my aforementioned mother, who has gotten dragged to many book events with me, and whenever I put her as a plant in the audience, I make her come up on stage and sing what we call the Dead Donkey Song, which is a Calabrese folk song about a dead donkey. And so I think what's happened at this point is that I've just sung the Dead Donkey Song one too many times, and I'm now a musical artist instead of a writer. So thank you for asking.
Excellent.
How do you follow that? I assume this is someone who knows you. They've heard you and your mother singing together. You may in fact be a musical artist.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Juliet and I have spent many an hour doing karaoke together, and
how many hours?
Mm-hmm. I can vouch. She's got pipes. She can sing.
Erika's rendition of Fever is like recordable. It is so good. You don't want to go after her. You do not want to be on the stage after Erika. It's like, can't follow that.
Well, I suppose I will close us out with one question. What is the best karaoke song?
Oh, that's rough.
Whitney, I wanted to
situational karaoke songs. Like if you had to.
I always say, so my husband's in the chat, go Rob. So we like to duet together to the Butthole Surfers song, Pepper, and it's hilarious. But if I want to make it weird, I will absolutely sing George Michael's Father Figure.
It's a good one.
It makes it weird.
But karaoke should be weird.
It should be weird.
What about you, Juliet? What is the best karaoke song?
I want to dance with
yeah. It's good. That gets everyone going.
Yeah.
It does. And it's hard to it's hard to not have fun on the stage with that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess one last time, I will remind everybody that we do have signed book plates at the store, and we do have copies of the book ready to ship out to you. We would be pleased to do so. We will be editing this event just a little bit and putting it up on our YouTube channel. We will be sending the link out. If you have anybody in your life that you think would have enjoyed this program, when we send the link, we do encourage you to send that out. The more eyes on these books right now, the better. So it would be doing all of us a favor if you would do that. So in that same email where I will be sending out the YouTube link, I will also be including the list for Juliet and Erika's suggested reading for the books that they recommend by Black authors and content creators. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this evening. We were very pleased to have you here tonight, Juliet and Erika. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, everybody, joining us from home. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gibsons.
Thank you.